Okay, I think we'll get things started. Probably the majority who are joining have joined by now. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Ian McGowan, and I am the Managing Director at Barrier. I'm joined today by Barrier's partners, Craft Prospect and Quereca. We have Sonali and Colin from Craft Prospect and Araceli from Quereca. We'll be discussing quantum key distribution and the application of space-based technology, which makes a quantum key distribution service possible on a global scale. Craft Prospect is a space engineering practice that delivers mission-enabling products and develops mission applications which enable the possibility of smart and secure space. Craft Prospect specialise in small space missions and provide dedicated services to support the design and delivery of smarter satellites. Quereca is a global provider of all the resources and training that you need to create value, make an impact and grow your business with quantum technologies. And last year, the Royal Society described Quereca as the company that fills the gap in the existing quantum community, creating a society for quantum through a common language. So for those of you interested in quantum, please do check out Quereca. They have a range of offerings from professional services and business development, all the way through to the first online platform for training and recruitment that's focused on enabling quantum in business. So, for those of you who don't know who Barrier are, we are a UK-based cybersecurity managed service provider, and we are headquartered in Scotland. We work in partnership with our clients as a trusted partner for cybersecurity, working closely with each individual business to understand their unique requirements, helping to identify and resolve cyber risk. On a personal note, I've been working in the cybersecurity industry for almost 20 years now, and I spend most of my time at Barrier focusing on the provision of security operations for our customer base. And that can range from anything really from managing security incidents, such as phishing attacks or ransomware infections, through to designing secure system architectures for industrial control system environments, just like the augmented quantum key distribution service that we'll be discussing today. Okay, so how do Barrier help? Well, because we specialise and focus on cybersecurity, we are well positioned to assist in a number of areas. I won't walk through all of these today, but if you do need any assistance in any of these areas, please do get in touch. Our Security Operations Centre provides the 3 pillars of SecOps: protection against threats such as ransomware, malware and phishing attacks, detection of threats which have somehow bypassed the security controls deployed, and that happens unfortunately. And then lastly, but certainly not least, response. Response to any kind of malicious hacking activity once it begins. And the little cog on the top row, OT and SCADA, that's the type of security that we're really delivering into this project that I'll be discussing, and that's operational technology. Okay, so here's the agenda for today's webinar. We'll start off talking about some of the post-quantum cryptography risks, and I'll be talking about why we're doing what we're doing with the augmented quantum key distribution service and why it's required. I'll then give some background on the project for augmented quantum key distribution. I'll give an overview of OT, or operational technology, or SCADA technology, security, just a very high level intro. And then I'll hand over to Sonali from Craft Prospect, and Sonali will she'll give an introduction to quantum, and then she'll talk about quantum key distribution and kind of some of the mechanics that's involved with that, and then the application of quantum key distribution via space-based technology. And then once we've done that, Sonali will open up the webinar for questions. And you can post questions into the chat box, and we'll cover off any questions that we receive at the end. Okay, so I think most people have probably heard of quantum computing, but it's still emerging as a reality at the moment. But the computational power provided by a quantum computer will put current encryption methods at risk of being cracked mathematically. So public key cryptography, also known as asymmetric cryptography, is widely used today in industry and society. And that's what the picture in the slide shows here. The process of using asymmetric encryption and decryption through the use of public and private encryption keys. So asymmetric encryption relies on complex mathematical problems that conventional computers would struggle to solve. However, the vast improvements in processing power that would come with quantum computers will put the security and the reliability of public key cryptography at risk. So quantum key distribution, or QKD, is a relatively new technology that relies on quantum mechanics to deliver encryption keys that can then be used for symmetric encryption, which should be resistant to the threat of quantum computing's power. Okay, so Sonali will cover how the quantum mechanics aspect is leveraged through the monitoring of photon states. And just to set the scene before I go on, however, it's important to know that using quantum mechanics to deliver the encryption keys protects them from eavesdropping, because we can detect when the communication of the keys has been compromised by a third party due to the nature of the quantum state and because of how quantum mechanics work. So this makes quantum key distribution stronger than current public key cryptography for the transmission of encryption keys, or any other data for that matter. Craft Prospect are actually working on other related projects that will combine responsive operations and autonomous CubeSats with quantum key distribution to provide an automated, efficient and secure QKD service. QKD, or quantum key distribution, is an emerging field within cybersecurity, which can serve to supplement increased assured demand or as a replacement for existing public key infrastructure. Okay, so the project that we're working on. So I was going to put the European Space Agency logo here, but when I Googled it, I found this image and had to use it. The work that we are doing as part of a consortium has been led by Craft Prospect and supported by the European Space Agency. The project objective is to define an augmented quantum key distribution satellite service that uses a type of nanosatellite known as a CubeSat to deliver cryptographic keys and related services down from space to security hardware that can then use those keys, and they will be secured and assured when they're received. Encryption keys, those keys will be used for encrypting sensitive data, and all at the fraction of a cost of using traditional satellite constellations and infrastructure. So the focus of the work that we've been doing has been on the provision of a secure network key distribution service that supports highly secure networks. We've worked on a number of use cases to help develop the application of the augmented QKD service, and it's compatible with the requirements of the market verticals that have expressed interest in adopting quantum key distribution, mainly to ensure that long-term data confidentiality can be achieved. So if encrypted traffic being transmitted today on public networks such as the internet is recorded now with the intent of accessing the confidential information that's being transmitted encrypted, then it's safe to say that there is a high risk of that data being compromised or decrypted in a post-quantum future if it's being stored. So because the asymmetric cryptography used to share encryption keys will be crackable, exposing the encryption keys used for the subsequent symmetric encryption data transfer. So typically asymmetric encryption is used for key exchange and symmetric encryption is used for data transfer. And that's mainly due to the efficiency that both methods provide for the kind of respective responsibility, whether it's data encryption or key exchange. So the use cases being developed have catered to specific industry verticals, but the augmented QKD service should be able to support almost all applications. So verticals such as telecommunications, financial services, oil and gas, and governments for things like diplomatic cables. These are all use cases that can be catered for using augmented quantum key distribution. The service will be low cost, it will be scalable, and it will be rapidly deployable. And then importantly, it can also be used to augment existing and proposed QKD platforms. so that it can mitigate some of the current QKD delivery challenges. And Sonali will go into more of that later. So this kind of European Space Agency supported work is delivered by a consortium, and it's seen a partnership develop between Craft Prospect, who provide upstream and space quantum technology expertise, with us, Barrier, providing the cybersecurity and security service delivery aspect. Okay, so there are some specific challenges when it comes to the type of systems being designed for augmented QKD. And those challenges are related to the use of what is referred to as operational technology, or OT, also known as SCADA, industrial control systems, industrial automation control systems, and various other names. So I won't be going into the design of the augmented QKD service on this webinar, but I'm sure you can imagine that when you're using nanosatellites and satellite ground stations and RF links, that we are leveraging industrial control system components. So this type of system can present a different risk because there is a physical aspect to the risk. Because it's not just digital or data related, there is a physical element that can cause physical harm or even a loss of life. So OT security is an area that we specialise in at Barrier, and it's how Barrier and Craft Prospect actually started working together. We refer to this as the cyber physical impact, and I think it's a good descriptor of the risk because we're taking the actions or operations of a hacker and then concerning ourselves with the physical impact that it causes, rather than the digital, which is kind of more data related impact. So I'll very quickly talk us through some prominent examples of attacks on OT systems where you can see the cyber physical impact being manifested. And then OT is used in many different industries to collect and analyze real-time data, as well as to control functions of industrial components such as programmable logic controllers. And that makes OT systems a target to hackers with malicious intent. And given that augmented QKD service will be hosting and delivering encryption keys to critical systems, I'm sure you can appreciate that it will be at risk of hackers attempting to compromise the service. So to get a better insight into OT security and that cyber physical impact, let's take a look at some prominent attacks on OT systems. And these attacks here are all related to nuclear, energy, and the petrochemical sectors. But these kind of risks, or the similar risks in these types of systems, these are kind of present across most industrial control systems. Okay, so going back 10 years to 2010, the one that really kicked up a fuss in the kind of SCADA security space was a piece of malware called Stocksnet. So Stocksnet was one of the most complex and modular malware samples identified at the time. It targeted the Iranian nuclear power centrifuges in Iran, presumably to derail their nuclear development efforts. And it infected SCADA and control system networks. And it was presumed by some to have damaged as many as 20% of the nuclear power centrifuges in Iran. The Stuxnet malware was a defining moment for OT system operators globally because it was considered to be the first known threat that specifically targeted PLCs or programmable logic controllers and other SCADA components. So the US Department for Homeland Security, the Industrial Control System Cyber Emergency Team, they issued multiple guidelines on how to defend against the Stuxnet malware, which, although believed to be malware targeting Iran, actually also ended up infecting other systems globally, including the US. In 2014, the US published a series of alerts describing a sophisticated piece of malware called BlackEnergy. And that BlackEnergy had impacted many kind of SCADA systems in the US. BlackEnergy targeted components such as HMIs, which are part of a SCADA system, and included modules that searched out network-connected file shares and removable media. And the reason for that was so that it was to help the malware spread across the infected environments, and also to let it kind of jump across air-gapped networks. So the bigger news related to BlackEnergy, though, was when the first known cyber attack on a power grid knocked out electricity to nearly 250,000 Ukrainians the next year in 2015. So hackers shut off power at approximately 30 substations leaving almost 250,000 people without electricity for nearly 6 hours. So OT equipment wasn't working and power restoration had to be done manually. So the operators had to use manual process to kind of recover from that. Then there was a second attack on the Ukraine power grid in 2016, I think it was. Yeah, it was a year after the first, when Kiev was knocked offline and went dark again. So attackers then attacked monitoring stations, kind of abruptly went blind and caused breakers to trip in 30 substations. And then more recently, we had Triton discovered in a Saudi petrochemical plant back in 2017. And Triton was able to disable safety instrumentation systems, which then could then have contributed to a potential plant disaster. And it's actually been referred to as the world's most murderous malware. It was used to compromise the Triconics industrial safety technology made by Schneider, and is believed to have been a state-sponsored attack. The initial foothold for Triton was a Windows vulnerability, so it's always, it's important to keep a focus on our IT security as well as our OT security. But yeah, Triton probably one of the more recent ones out there. So that gives a fairly high-level overview of the kind of augmented QKD service that we've been working on and some of the kind of security requirements that have driven that. And hopefully some of those examples help to illustrate the type of impact an attack on a system using SCADA can have, and the types of security threats and threat actors that we're designing against, within the consortium. So I'll now hand over to Sonali and Colin from Craft Prospect, who can take us through an introduction to quantum key distribution, and the kind of space system piece in a bit more detail. And then at the end of that, Sonali will open up the webinar for any questions that you may have, and those can be posted into the chat. So I'll just pass over the presentation to Sonali now.
Ian, just waiting to share.
You should have, yeah, there you go.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming today. And thanks, Ian, for that very interesting introduction to different kinds of attacks that could happen. This has been a very exciting consortium to be working in, to be looking at all the security challenges that comes with making space QKD a reality, a service reality. In my presentation, I'm going to take you into a short introduction into why we do space QKD, what is augmented QKD all about, what kind of sources we are using, what kind of protocols we are going to be using in the upcoming ROCKS mission. So as Ian mentioned, public key cryptography usually bases security on tough maths algorithms, but they're usually very hard to crack, but not completely uncrackable. And as we have heard from many different sources, and we have seen a few examples in the recent future, there are better and better quantum computer performances in the market every day. And soon it will be very easy to crack these kind of public key cryptography algorithms using a quantum computer. It could take from 3 to 12 years in the next decade, but be sure that many people, cybercrime syndicates could still be storing our data already in order to make sure that when quantum computers are on the horizon, they will take that data and start cracking on. So how do we make sure that in this kind of a scenario, we can actually protect our data? How do we make our data future safe? And this is where Craft Prospect and quantum cryptography come in. We use quantum objects such as single photons to encrypt information. Now, because we use the quantum properties of objects such as single photons, if someone else, such as an eavesdropper, tries to capture those photons mid-channel or tries to hack the channel when the photons are being transferred, this quantum property, like the no-cloning theorem, will demand that this alters the state of the photons. And when we measure the photons on the ground, or when someone is trying to receive the photons, we will always be able to find out that the photon has been altered. And so that we will always be able to find out that our security has been compromised. And we'll also be sure that even if quantum computers are trying to crack this channel, we'll be able to find that out. And so this is why we call it future safe. Now, a little introduction to what exactly is quantum key distribution. So as I mentioned earlier, quantum key distribution will try and encode information into single photons, which are the yellow moving dots on my screen. So usually we call Alice as the sender and Bob is the receiver. So in this case, Alice is going to be our satellite, which is the rocks. So you can see our little headband on there, the craft prospect headband. And Bob is going to be the ground station. And we will be working with a quantum channel through which the photons are going to be transferred. There will also be an authenticated public channel. This is where the authentication of public key cryptography channels come into play as well, and a lot of other security concerns. So using this authenticated public channel, classical channel, we'll be able to match different information related to the photons so that we, at the end of the day, will be able to establish whether or not Eve, who is our eavesdropper, has enough information about the key that is being transferred or not. In rocks, we'll be using a protocol known as the BB84 protocol. This will use a weak coherent photon laser source. There are many kinds of sources we could be using. We could have used a single photon source, but these are quite hard to develop and very few people are offering them commercially on the market right now. There are entangled photon source protocols, but we are not going to be using that because WCP protocol is usually the most straightforward way and easiest way of showing that we can do quantum key distribution. Now, yes, that is quantum key distribution, but where does space come in? So initially, what you saw in the last slide is quantum key distribution that can be done on a tabletop or in free space, but maximum limited by a distance of 500 to 600 kilometers. There are many commercial quantum key distribution systems out there in the market right now, but that is a limitation. We cannot do quantum key distribution using single photons if the distance between the sender and the receiver is more than 500 kilometers, even using repeaters. This is because the photons either denature or find a lot of obstacles while they are traveling through either the atmosphere or a fiber optic cable. Now, in that case, what happens if we want to have a secure channel between two different countries or two different continents, which are more than 500 kilometers, or let's say 2,500 kilometers? In that case, there is a way. We can put up ground stations at these two places. So let's say that I am currently in Scotland, in the UK, and I want to have a quantum secure channel to someone in Canada. So I can come to an agreement. I can set up a ground station on my side. They can set up a ground station on their side. We can come to an agreement and set a satellite up there. The satellite, when it is going over my ground station, will be able to open a quantum channel to me. The satellite will be able to send down photons, which I will make a measurement using my ground station. When the same satellite is going over the other ground station in the same orbit, then it will open a quantum channel over the other ground station and send photons, single photons, down to the other ground station. And that ground station will be able to perform its own measurements and figure out what is a key. Now, using a combination of both of these keys and a particular quantum algorithm, the satellite will basically act as a relay. Now, this works because this satellite we're going to be sending up is going to be at a 500 to 600 kilometers LEO orbit. So effectively, we are under the limits of when QKD starts to break down. But because the satellite is in space and the atmosphere is basically around 10 kilometers at most parts of the Earth, the photons will travel mostly through empty space. And so they will not be subject to the kind of denaturing that happens in Earth's atmosphere, or denaturing that will happen if they travel through fiber optic. Now, this is all very simple to showcase, but in reality, if we want to send up a satellite, we need to make sure there is a quantum source that we can put on the satellite. The quantum source needs to be radiation hardy. It needs to be very, very small to go on a smaller satellite. It needs to have a lot of vibration, shock, and a lot of other hardiness testing done on the optical components so that they do not break or they do not denature in orbit, and they can survive in a space environment. So there's quite a lot of electronics as well as quantum components we're going to be putting on the satellite. It's the same on the ground station as well. We'll be needing to put detectors for single photons or entangled photons. We will need to have the capacity to measure quantum states. We will need to have the capacity to handle quantum random numbers. We will need to have a proper timing and sync using either some kind of algorithm or quantum clocks, hopefully in the future. Now, if we want to make this a service, if we want to make this a commercial reality, we need to ensure that we can make it fast and deployable. If we want to go with a conventional satellite, which are usually really big and require a big team of people to work on, they will need a lot of customized components to be put on them, then this would slow down, first of all, the manufacturing of such commercial systems, as well as they have less risk appetite. So this will cost us much more to deploy, and we won't be able to deploy them one after the other really, really fast. Now, this is where smaller satellites come in because they have more risk appetite, they cost less, they are easier and faster to deploy. And so we are going with the solution of using CubeSats. Now, I've given a picture of what the unit of a CubeSat looks like. A 1U CubeSat usually is 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. ROCS, which is a responsive operation key services that Crab Prospect is going to be launching in 2022, is going to be a 6U CubeSat, which you can see over there. And to scale, I've placed a loaf of bread, but consider this a big loaf of bread that can cover a 12U CubeSat. But yeah, even then, they can very easily be put on a tabletop, a small tabletop. And this is where a lot of the complications start, actually, because we have to highly miniaturize every single system. So we have to take a huge, large optics table on a university, and we have to figure out a way to miniaturize everything which can fit on the top of my palm, which should be able to fit on a 1U CubeSat, for example. Right. So in the next slide, I want to give a little bit of a demonstration of what exactly is a protocol we are going to be implementing on ROCS, which is a BB84 protocol I mentioned earlier. On the space side, so Alice is basically the satellite. It will be having a QRNG, quantum random number generator, which is going to be generating random bits. It'll be 0 or 1. Now, depending on the bit stream and whether we are generating 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, or 1, 1, the QRNG is going to send a message to laser drivers, which are going to be emitting photons in different polarization. Now the quantum channel is opened, the QRNG and the laser drivers start emitting photons in various different polarizations. You can see that there are 4 different polarizations in this particular protocol, the vertical polarization, a horizontal polarization, anti-diagonal, as well as a diagonal polarization. Now, Bob, which is the ground station, in this consortium we're working on, we have a mobile ground station working with the University of Bristol. So they will be making measurements on the received photons. After this measurement, Bob will have a raw key, some kind of a key he generates from his measurements. Now, the next step is that using the classical channel, we will have to compare the basis between the basis that Alice has used to generate her photons and the basis that Bob uses to measure his photons. Now, after this comparison, Bob would have a very raw key, which has happened after the sifting process. There are various steps we have to ensure before we can actually establish a key. So the first is key sifting, which produces a very, very, very rough key, which we can't really use. We then use a fraction of that key over the classical channel, again, the authenticated classical channel, remember, for estimating a few parameters. This estimation of the parameters helps us understand how much information can an eavesdropper actually have gotten from our channel, from the transmission window. Using this information and the error correction and the parameter estimation step, we will be able to correct for many errors that could have happened during the process. The next step is known as privacy amplification, which ensures that we throw away the parts of the key that we have used for parameter estimation. We can also improve the security of the key by following certain steps, which is basically this whole step. Now, after we have done this, we will be able to come up with a number that says, okay, your key is secure. Please proceed to establish a key, or your key is insecure. Do not establish a key. And so at the end of this process, you can hope that a key is established and you can use it as a one-time password, or you can use it to have further secure communication between two parties. There are various layers that we can divide up this making of a QKD, CubeSat QKD payload as. There will be optical systems which have lasers, LEDs, mirrors, telescope. There will be loads of electrical and other hardware. There will be embedded systems. There is a software or the protocol layer. There is a CubeSat computer modes, which ensures that the correct state is being called at the correct time, and so on. And this actually ensures that there's a lot of complication involved when we are actually evaluating for the security of such a protocol. Because the security of the whole service sector is not going to depend only on the security of protocol, but there are various other things that is going to depend on. For example, can there be side channel attacks? For example, what if the eavesdropper wants to take certain bits of the photon out from the midstream and try and figure out the states of the photons? Now, this can happen if instead of sending a single photon every single time, we are sending more than one photon. And we have to ensure that we are not doing that. There can be denial of service attacks, which are quite common in QKD, and people are still working on how to avoid these or how to get around this. There will be a key management layer, which manages various mechanisms of storing the key or deleting those keys in a secure manner. This key management layer will also interact or interface with your system. So for example, if you want to have a key delivered to your smartphone, there will be a layer which interacts with your smartphone electronics or the web layer, for example. We need to give a little bit of thought into how do we authenticate a classical channel. There are various ways of doing this. We need to also ensure that the random numbers that the QRNG is generating are actually random rather than pseudo-random, because this also feeds into the security of the whole protocol. There has to be evaluation of the various electronic layers, of the optical layers, evaluation of link. How much leakage are we having? How much loss are we having in the link? Now, again, because CubeSats are relatively a new component, relatively a new thing, we actually don't really have lots of regulations around space security as well of CubeSats. And also the making of CubeSat QKD payload is cheaper because we use a lot of commercial off-the-shelf components. Now, using a lot of commercial off-the-shelf components comes with its own challenges because these are not customized, and we need to then go have a particular component testing system to ensure that there is no leakages, there is no insecurity in those layers that can allow hackers to hack the systems and just make the whole service stop at some point. There's also the problem of we are using open source systems on these kind of smaller satellite missions. We need to ensure that they're secure. We need to ensure that there's regular patches which are being updated and so on. So basically, this is to give you a laundry list of what we kind of go through when we are trying to bring to you a QKD, a space QKD, an augmented QKD as a service to ensure that we provide the highest level of security we can. A little glimpse of the payload box as it looks on our desk at the office. You can see the blue frame here. That is basically the 6U CubeSat. And then we have all these electronics as well as this box, which is basically the optical box for the QKD. All of these little things over here are the optical components that we're putting inside the box. And we are going to be subjecting this box through a lot of tests before it actually goes into launch. So yeah, so with this, I would like to conclude my talk. Colin will be there to answer a lot of questions with me if you might have. And with this, I would like to open the floor for questions as well. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.